Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about emergency readings and why you shouldn't offer them. So welcome, my name is Lauren. If you are new here, I'm a psychic development coach. I like to teach people how to develop their abilities, and that includes teaching people how to run a business, deal with clients. And one of the things that we do as psychics is we offer readings. And one thing that I see a lot of psychics offer is emergency readings. And the way I actually found out about them was by having people basically message me and ask, do you do emergency readings? And the point of these is basically that you're offering readings ASAP, same day. Maybe you're paying a little bit extra for them, or maybe you have the open availability to kind of be able to read someone day of, even if you don't charge extra. So that's the kind of readings that we're talking about here, and I wanted to make a quick little video on it. Now, this is not talking about priority readings, or there's a different type of reading. People might call it by the same name, but this is the type of reading where it's hey, I'm gonna put you at the top of my list, and you might pay extra to basically get your reading sooner. And these are totally fine. You already have the time for you don't care, you've got the time open, you're free, you're available, you have the time and energy, that's okay. You're allowed to do that if you have the time and the energy. So these emergency readings, usually these are folks looking to get a reading right away, if not same day or within a couple hours. And why they usually want this is the whole problem around it. It's usually because these people are desperate to know the answers right away. And hey, no judgment. I have wanted to know answers desperately right away too. Almost all of us do when we're looking to get a reading. But usually why they're asking for it is because they're just very, very emotional and they want to know the future. They want to control the outcome, they want to control the circumstances, and so that's kind of the motivation behind why they're reaching out. Now, my coach taught me to not do these types of readings. They didn't have a name for them back then, but she basically said, don't do readings when people are desperate. Make sure there's some time that you give before you offer a reading to somebody, and we'll get into that. But she said not to do this basically for two reasons. It can affect your reading as the reader, but it can also have negative effects for the client, the person who's receiving the reading. And I would also add that it attracts a certain type of person into your readings, which I feel like some people can handle these types of folks really well. I feel like personally I don't like to deal with that kind of energy and that desperation, that very emotional client, so it's not something I prefer. So what happens usually with this type of person is that when you are emotional, again, this is not just I'm singling out somebody or a group of people. We all get this way. But usually when you are in that desperate emotional place, you don't listen. You don't listen, and you want to hear what you want to hear. And so what you're working against as you're reading this person is the fact that they don't listen. So when I used to make the mistake of reading people too soon, or even sometimes this still happens where they will wait a week, but they will still be very emotional. So this is not a hard and fast rule of if you wait, you won't get someone who's emotional. But even when I would read people back then for emergency readings, I had couple friends is what happened, that I basically let them come over same day. I would be repeating myself over and over, and I had answered their question, but they just would not take it in their head or remember it because they were so emotional. They either didn't want to hear the information, didn't want to believe it. And so often they don't listen. So that creates a lot of problems because you're having to repeat yourself, and that selective hearing, again, they walk away from the reading hearing what they want to hear and maybe not what they should have heard. And not that that's your responsibility as the reader to make sure they receive, that's one thing I talk about a lot, is that when you are reading people, you do not have you shouldn't have the authority of being hey, I'm going to follow up with you and make sure you took all the action that I gave you and that you listened to every piece of advice. That's not your responsibility. Your responsibility as a psychic is to deliver the information and then let it go. You do not get to control the person and what they do with that information after they leave. But it can still be frustrating when they don't hear that and they come back to you several times in a row asking the same question and you're just like, I answered it. And so it can be a very repetitive, very frustrating reading, which again affects you as the reader. If you're getting frustrated in the middle of the reading because they're interrupting, they're not listening, they're being selective with the information, then you can get kind of derailed and out of your psychic mind because of your emotions. These people often also like push boundaries a little bit more because when you're in an emotional state, you're not regulated. You know, you're not thinking about, oh, I should stop when time is up. You know, oh, I should be kind, I should be nice, you know. So they'll often be rude, they'll be pushy. They will often try to push you over your time to kind of keep getting more information. Overall, your emotional control is a lot less there when you are desperate and when you are super emotional. And like the best way I can describe this is like it's very similar to people who want things for free, whether that's like a reading or like anything. Like think about if you've ever had a client who wants a reading for free, and then it's like the people that want things for free, they'll get the thing for free and then they'll nitpick and they'll judge it and they'll want you to redo it, or they'll come up with every single way to like penny pinch and like get more and get more out of you. Whereas like when you put skin in the game, when you put like an exchange of energy of some sort, whether that's money or like, you know, maybe a service for a service, or maybe you're trading out like an item, like a good, then, you know, there's a little bit more there. It's saying like, I value your time enough to offer up something in exchange. So it's like very, very similar here of like, you are allowing a certain energy to come in, and so you're kind of having to deal with the consequences of that lack of emotional control and that desperation. Another downside to emergency readings as well is that if you allow people to keep coming back to you, it can very quickly turn into a very unhealthy dependence on you as a reader. You know, think about what you're basically teaching that person. You're teaching them that every time that they are emotional and really like fraught about something, that they have the ability to come to you and just like unload on you, and you will be there to answer that question every time. Instead of what I think is more important, handling it yourself, learning how to control those emotions yourself, and, you know, cool down and think through your thoughts and know how to take care of yourself in that moment, so that, you know, whenever you're desperate, you're not relying on somebody else to solve your emotional problems. You have tools in your pocket to do that yourself. So essentially you get into a zone of it crossing other ethics and other boundaries. Maybe they start coming too often. Maybe they're staying too long and pushing you over in the readings. Maybe they're emailing you or texting you after that reading for hours and hours on end. Again, when one boundary gets crossed, it's like a domino effect, and it just won't stop until you ultimately set those boundaries. Some people might be better at this than others, and it might not always be like such a horror story. But I will say, in the several times that I did it towards the beginning, just to see, because I was like, oh, I can do this. I can take the extra money and I'll be able to handle it. I always regretted it, because it was basically like dealing with too many problems, having to set boundaries, and it just feeling icky. Another thing that it can do to you as a reader is it just kind of affects your bias, because if they're panicky, if they're emotional, you're open. You're probably going to feel that panic, that emotion, and it might affect your bias in like the way you ask questions or the way you're trying to connect. Like if you feel rushed, or if you feel like you have to please this person to make them happy, you know, you might kind of misstep. You might forget to do certain steps of protecting yourself, or you might ask questions the wrong way because you really just want them to be happy and okay. So there's also that aspect there of like, it could change how you approach the reading, and it might not be in the best way. Now, if you already offer emergency readings, do you have to stop? No, that's not what I'm saying. It's more of just know what you are attracting. Know the consequences of what could happen and prepare for them accordingly. Again, like there might be people out there who have no problem being like, the session is over, I'm hanging up the phone. You know, don't call me, don't text me after our reading, whatever. You don't have to do it if you don't feel comfortable, but however, if you are starting, if you're new, if you are wanting to offer readings and you're just maybe haven't thought about this, I hope you kind of take the advice here and take some steps to kind of avoid or prevent this from happening. Again, because it might still happen no matter how long somebody waits, but at least you're not dealing with the emergency crazy energy of it happening in a moment and feeling like you need to deal with it or handle it in a moment. So how do you prevent something like this from happening? What I used to do and what I still do is I would give some sort of like excuse of like, oh, I'm really busy today. I've got too many readings. I got this, I got that, but I can get to it first thing tomorrow or something like that. Or you can be a little bit more firm and say, I have a 48-hour rule. You got to wait 48 hours before contacting me. I've also done that at periods, or not before contacting me, but before we can set up a reading. Like my booking time is 2 days out. I'm happy to give you this day or this day, and you kind of provide the days that you're available. And I feel like sometimes people will book you and they'll have the capacity to wait. Other times they will breathe for an hour and then realize, I don't need it, I was being dramatic, you know what I mean? Or if they really, really desperately need somebody, they'll just go find somebody else and you kind of saved yourself like a really tough reading. Sometimes I didn't have an excuse and I felt like I needed one, but you can just say, I'm not available, I'm sorry. You can ignore emails, you can ignore messages, you don't have to answer them right away. I think in this day and age, we feel like the minute we get an email, the minute we get a text message, we have to respond right away. No, you can ignore it for the night, go about your night, and then the next day be like, sorry, I was doing XYZ, or sorry, my phone was off, I turned my phone off for work or something, or at the end of the night. Like, again, you don't even need to give an explanation. You don't owe that to anybody. And so you can just say, hey, I'm available this date and this date. What I'm going to do in the future is I'm going to say, sorry, I don't do emergency readings. Here's why. And I'm going to point to my FAQ page on my website, which will link to this video probably. Ultimately, just know you don't owe people an explanation. You are allowed to say, here's my policy. It's this many days out. Ultimately, what has helped me the most is to pay for a booking system. So I use Wix's booking system, and it has it set up already. The latest right now that you can book with me is 24 hours before a session. So like you cannot book any later than that. So that to me says, okay, if they really were desperate, they'd have a whole 24 hours before they even talk to me. But you can even set that out further. And basically, when I have people that ask me for a reading on a day that I'm not reading, I won't really go out of my way. I'll say, oh, sorry, I don't read on this day and that day. I've got to watch my son. But here's my next availability. Again, you don't owe a big, long explanation. You just can send your availability, and that's it. So I do talk about dealing with difficult clients and dealing with a lot of these like stresses and things with your business that we don't often think about when we are approaching psychic work. So if you're starting your own business and you want to learn more, definitely check out my Psychic Development Masterclass course because I go over situations like these quite a bit. So hopefully this video gave you a good sense of like how doing those emergency readings could affect the reading in a negative way, and how you could possibly prevent it. If you have any questions about it, please let me know in the comments down below. And just know I also have a Patreon membership. Once a month we do Q&A videos, and basically you can get on there and ask me any questions that you have. Give this video a like if it was helpful, and I will see you all in the next one. Alrighty, bye.